There's been a lot of talk about the ratings for Doctor Who Series 11, and while there has been a definite downward trajectory, the ratings have not yet spiraled to the levels we had expected. Well, this video is going to provide a theory as to why this is so. For those of us old folks, let's go all the way back to 1999. The world was a better place then. Many of us that are really old grew up with Star Wars in the 1980s. I'm not quite old enough to remember Star Wars in the 70s. We had been waiting for 17 years for another Star Wars movie. I remember first hearing about Episode 1 in a sci-fi magazine back in 1993, which at that point had the movie slated for a 1997 release. We had been waiting for years for this film, and on May 19th, 1999, it finally arrived. A few of my friends went to see it on release day, but I had to wait for the 20th, as I got stuck working that night. Everyone, and I mean everyone, including myself, was going on about how this film was the greatest thing ever. Our minds were clouded by a few things. The effects, which, despite looking very dated now, were state of the art at the time, and the soundtrack was unlike anything we'd ever heard. Even the local theater that was screening the movie was forced to upgrade its sound system as a requirement to show the film. It later got knocked down after a rat and termite infestation, but that's another story. Our perceived love for the film was not only based upon visual and auditory stimuli, it was heavily fueled by nostalgia and our desire for the film to be good. It wasn't even desire. Thinking that this movie wasn't going to be all it could be never even crossed our minds. Kind of like thinking the Titanic was unsinkable. This was Star Wars, and it had been around forever, and episodes 4 to 6 had been unmatched. They've still been unmatched to this day, actually. But with subsequent viewings, we started to realize that something wasn't quite right. Some people realized this while the movie was still in theaters, but most of us didn't realize it until it came out on home video. The initial release came out in April 2000 on VHS, not on DVD, which was really gaining steam at that point. The effects became slightly less impressive when seen on the small screen in VHS quality, and people were, for the first time, forced to accept what they were watching. Denial slowly turned to anger, as over time, everyone came to realize that this was a terrible movie. Time had removed our excitement and anticipation, and now it's pretty much accepted that this is a terrible movie, and was the worst entry in the Star Wars franchise until an even worse movie reared its head a year ago. I refer to this as the Phantom Menace effect. The idea that nostalgia, anticipation, and wanting so bad for something to be good clouds your judgment. This theory can also apply to a certain other Star Wars movie that came out a year ago. Expectations were high for The Last Jedi, and we saw the Phantom Menace effect play out over a 2-day period this time, not over 8 or so months the way it did 17 years ago. I think the short time frame may have been a result of what we had already learned about false expectations with the Phantom Menace. The Last Jedi used trickery to convince you that it was a good movie. Visually, it was stunning, and the effects were quite good. The effects very briefly masked just what a disaster this movie was and what it had done to Star Wars lore. This effect wore off as soon as people walked out of the theater. We had already been duped once, and we weren't going to be duped again. Then cue Lucasfilm attacking the fanbase, and what you ended up with was the solo box office disaster. Let's translate this to Doctor Who. We have already experienced the Phantom Menace effect, but on a much smaller and much less serious scale. Remember Series 6? Let's go back to 2011. By this point, New Who had never really faltered, despite the very rare bad episode. Like it or not, in retrospect, Russell T Davies' stewardship had been a massive success, and it seemed as if Stephen Moffat was going to bring the show to a whole new level after the masterpiece that was Series 5. Then we had Series 6. The masking in this case was some good standalone episodes, an amazing visual look, and a repetition of the overall style from Series 5. It wasn't until the series was done that we had to ask ourselves, what the hell was that? I'm of course referring to the nonsensical series arc that, to this day, nobody can really figure out, and I'm pretty sure that even Stephen Moffat has no idea what's going on in The Wedding of River Song. There was also some of this with Series 9 and 10. Our masking again were the visuals and the presence of Peter Capaldi, but upon examining both series, the stories are incredibly weak, and ideology was thrown in all over the place. At this point, the show was still Doctor Who, but it seemed like Doctor Who in freefall. Now let's switch to Series 11, whereby some sections of the fanbase is witnessing the full impact of the Phantom Menace effect. Part of the effect in this case comes as a direct result of Series 9 and 10. Most fandom has accepted that these two series are not very good. Some of us had accepted that things were only going to get worse, but others were desperately hoping that a radical departure for Series 11 was going to save the show. Doctor Who means a lot to many people, and the idea that it could be cancelled or put back on hiatus is unthinkable. There is 55 years of nostalgia running behind Series 11, and the haunting presence of the previous hiatus. People desperately want this series to be good, and this desperation can cloud objective judgment. There's also some trickery with the usage of new cameras that give the show a more cinematic look, but this loses a lot of its luster when mixed with very bad special effects and very lazy directing. Many still seem to be ignoring this for now. The main factor is nostalgia, and desperation for Doctor Who to never go away again. It seems that, for at least some Whovians, they are desperate to see the show as it was, not how it is. The ratings can be broken down into three groups. One very small but very vocal group of hateful ideologues. Just look at my comments section and you'll see who they are. The second are people that are hate watching or watching the show in the same way you would glance at a car wreck on the side of the road. This group also consists of people like myself, long-term fans that now watch the show merely to make review videos and expose Chibnall's dumpster fire for what it is. Then we have the third group, a portion of Doctor Who's long-term fans that are currently feeling the full impact of the Phantom Menace effect. These people are definitely not the first group, as they are generally respectful of those that don't share their opinions. They are people that will go on forums and rate every episode as 10 out of 10 without really giving any justification for this rating. They have conditioned themselves to think that because it has the name Doctor Who on it, then it must be good. I hypothesize that this group is largely responsible for the ratings not decreasing at the level they should be decreasing. They are under a shared delusion that, while perhaps not necessarily their fault, is definitely there. I think Doctor Who's day of reckoning will be when a large portion of this group wakes up and sees the catastrophe that is Series 11 for what it is. What they'll notice first is that this series has been nothing but one large ideological message. If that message doesn't really bother them, then they might notice how horrible these episodes really are, even if you take out the political messaging. Some might also notice how appallingly horrendous Jodie Whittaker's performance is, and might start to question what she has stated in interviews. They might also notice the attacks on Doctor Who's long-term fans at this point. The ultimate consequences for Doctor Who as a franchise might be as dire as they were for Lucasfilm with Solo. When the group currently suffering from the Phantom Menace effect walks away, then the show will have a very hard time justifying its continued existence. I think this might be one of the reasons why this year's Christmas special was moved to New Year's Day, to avoid potential embarrassment on Christmas Day. I can't help but wonder if this upcoming apocalypse is one of the reasons why it's been rumored that Chris Chibnall and Jodie Whittaker might be leaving. What will happen is a good portion of this group, after looking at Series 11 with the distance of time, will walk away, like so many other fans already have. Will this happen with the New Year's special or Series 12? Only time will tell. And that's it for today. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter and check out my other channel. And as always, everyone, thank you for watching, and have a great day.